In your chapter on muscles, you learned that there are 206 named muscles in the human body. Would it surprise you to know that there's some logic to how they're named? In this video, my main goal is to acquaint you with some of the ways that muscles are named and to give you a little bit of information about how they function. Your objectives are to describe the functional groups for your muscles and to explain how muscles in the human body are named, and give a few examples. As you should have learned by now, there are 3 different types of muscle: skeletal muscle, cardiac, and smooth muscle. All of these muscles consist of contractile tissues. That means that these tissues are able to produce tension and in some cases shorten and produce movement. When they're producing movement, it's important to know that muscles can only pull, never push. What one muscle group does, another group undoes. So for example, if you think about your biceps muscle in your upper arm and your triceps muscle, so if I'm standing in anatomical position, my biceps muscle is anterior and triceps is posterior. When the biceps muscle contracts to pull my forearm and my hand towards my shoulder, the triceps muscle, which is opposite, lengthens. The biceps is doing the work, the triceps is not. In order for me to extend my arm, I contract the triceps muscle, that's where the pull is coming from, and the biceps extends. So what the biceps does, the triceps undoes, and what the triceps does, the biceps undoes. There are 3 main functional groups for your muscles. You have your prime movers. They are sometimes called the agonists. Their major responsibility is to produce a specific movement. The opposing group would be the antagonist. They oppose or reverse a particular movement. So if you think about the biceps and the triceps, and I'm flexing my muscle, I'm showing you how big my biceps muscle is, which muscle would be the prime mover? The biceps would be, because it is contracting and causing me to flex my muscle, my arm. And what would the antagonist be? The triceps, right? Because it opposes that movement and undoes it. The prime mover and antagonist are located on opposite sides of a joint across which they act. So they're on opposite sides, basically, of my elbow. Synergists are muscles that help the prime movers make their movement. They might add extra force to the same movement, or sometimes they reduce undesirable or unnecessary movement. Fixators are a specific type of synergist that immobilizes a bone or a muscle's origin rather than enhancing the movement of the prime movers. They give the prime mover a stable base on which to act. So if you think about that biceps muscle, you have rotator cuff muscles around your shoulder that act as the fixators. They help to give the biceps muscle a less movable origin. Now, the action of a muscle can be inferred from where the muscle is relative to the joint that it crosses. So if we think about the shoulder joint for the next few slides, you know that it's capable of a lot of different movements. It can move anterior, posterior, lateral, medial. It can even move in a circle, right? And rotate. So if we consider the shoulder joint and the pectoralis major, so this is a large muscle that forms the upper chest wall. It's what people who lift weights sometimes call their pecs. It is anterior to the shoulder joint. And in that position, it's able to cause flexion, so it can move the joint anteriorly. Now, posterior to the shoulder joint, you have the latissimus dorsi, which is here. Its job is to produce extension, so it's going to allow, when that muscle contracts, it allows the arm to move posteriorly. And what about those lateral and medial movements? So remember, those are called adduction and abduction. Abduction is when we lift the extremity away from the body. So that would be like a more of a lateral movement. Okay. The deltoid muscle is responsible for that. That's the shoulder cap, that large, juicy muscle at the top of your arm. So it's in a position where when it contracts, the arm goes outward. So when this muscle shortens, the arm abducts, let me be clear, abducts away from the body. Opposing the deltoid, you have the teres major, and it's connected to the inferior angle of the scapula posteriorly and the humerus anteriorly. And when this muscle contracts, that is, it shortens in this case, it actually pulls the arm close to the body. It adds the arm to the body. It adducts the arm. So one thing to keep in mind is although there are 3 functional groups for your muscles, the same muscle could be part of each group, but just for different movements. So it could be the prime mover in one instance, it could be the antagonist in another, and then it could be a synergist for still a third movement. There are a number of factors that contribute to the way muscles are named. For example, a muscle might be named based upon where it's located in the body. The temporalis muscle is located over the temporal bone. There are a few epicranius muscles, and they're located on top of the cranium. Remember, epi means on top, so they're on top of the cranium. And then there are muscles like the biceps brachii and the triceps brachii. Brachii refers to the arm. Muscle shape can also contribute to how a muscle is named. You have the deltoid muscle, which is the shoulder cap. It's right on your shoulder. It's where you get a lot of injections. So it has a triangle shape, and that corresponds to the Greek letter delta. There's the serratus muscle, which are in the abdomen, and they look kind of like a saw blade, or if you think of a steak knife, that kind of zigzag looking edge, these muscles look a bit like that, so they're called the serratus muscles. Then there's the trapezius on the back. It looks like a trapezoid, so it gets the name trapezius. Some muscles are named according to their size. So maximus usually means the largest of a group of muscles. Minimus is the smallest. There is a medius in the middle. And then longus means that the muscle is long. So for example, the gluteus maximus is a large muscle. It's the largest of the gluteal muscles. The abductor digiti minimi is a small muscle, and so it has minimus or minimi as part of its name. Some muscles are named by the direction that the muscle fibers or fascicles are oriented on the body. Rectus usually means that the fibers run straight. Transversus means that the fibers run at right angles, and then oblique means that the fibers run at some angle that's not quite 90 degrees, and it basically goes along an imaginary defined axis. So the rectus abdominis, these are muscles that go straight down the abdomen, and because the muscle fibers run straight, it gets the name rectus. The external and internal obliques, these are muscles that are located lateral on the abdomen, and they don't run at 90-degree angles at all, but at an angle kind of in the middle. Then there's the transversus abdominis muscle. So guess what direction that one runs? The number of origins can also be part of a muscle's name. If you see biceps or bi in the name, that means that there are 2 origins. Triceps usually means that there's 3 origins. So think about the biceps femoris and the triceps brachii as examples of that. Finally, we have the location of attachments. So some muscles are named according to the point of origin and insertion. The best example of this is the sternocleidomastoid. Anytime you see a muscle that is named for the locations of its attachments, the origin is always first and the insertions are last. So for the sternocleidomastoid, it has two origins, one at the sternum and one at the clavicle. The clavicle is where the cleido comes from. And then the insertion is actually on the mastoid process of the skull. Then there's muscle action. So some muscles are named for the actions that they produce. They might have flexor or extensor in their name, like the extensor digitorum. Can you guess what that muscle does? Right, it's involved in extending the fingers. And then there's the flexor digitorum superficialis. Right, it's going to be flexing the digits. Sometimes several criteria can be combined. So the extensor carpi radialis longus muscle, extensor means that it extends, carpi means wrist, radialis means radius, and then longus means that it's a long muscle. Now, remember that we said that muscles are made up of cells called muscle fibers, and that the muscle fibers are bundled together into fascicles. So all of your skeletal muscles consist of fascicles, and the arrangements of the fascicles varies. And this results in muscles that have different shapes and functional capabilities. Some of the most common patterns of arrangement are worth knowing, especially the circular arrangement. So in the circular arrangement, your fascicles are arranged in a circle, and the muscles that have this kind of arrangement usually have the name orbicularis in it. So the orbicularis oculi and orbicularis oris are going to be muscles where the fascicles are arranged in a circle. I like to think of orbits when I think of orbicularis because orbits remind me of things moving in circles. Some muscles will have fascicles that are convergent, so we'll have a broad origin like you see here for the pectoralis major, but then it all converges on a single tendon, which is part of the insertion. Some muscles have fascicles that are arranged in a parallel fashion, and this gives us like a strap-like muscle. The one that you need to know is the sartorius. Looks like this, located here it goes across the thigh. So it has parallel fascicles. Some muscles have a spindle shape, and these are called fusiform. So the biceps brachii, it has two heads, two origins, which you can see here, but the muscle overall is spindle shaped. So this shape is called a spindle shape. Looks a little bit like a seed. Pinnate muscles look a bit like feathers to me. So you have short fascicles and they're attached obliquely to a central tendon that runs the length of the muscle. So this is a unipinnate muscle. This is the extensor digitorum. And what I hope you can see is here's the tendon and then the short fascicles coming off to the side. So this again looks like a feather to me. That's how I think of it. And in your unipinnate muscles, the fascicles are only attached to one side. Guess what bipinnate means? Right. Bipinnate means that we're going to have that tendon, but the fascicles will attach to both sides of the tendon. So the rectus femoris is an example of this. Multipinnate means that we're going to have lots of feathers that insert into one tendon, kind of like the deltoid. So here you can see the tendons running in this direction, the fascicles attached to both sides. There's more than one, and they're all converging on one tendon. This is a bit different from the convergent arrangement that we saw because we have multiple multiple tendons with their fascicles attached. So again, your most common patterns of fascicle arrangement are going to be circular, convergent, parallel, fusiform, and pinnate. The fascicles and their arrangement determines a muscle's range of motion, or how much movement there is in a muscle when the muscle shortens. Your fascicles also determine how much power there is in a muscle. Long fibers are able to contract along their long axis more, but they're usually not very powerful. Your power actually depends upon the number of muscle fibers. Since your bipinnate and multipinnate muscles have the most muscle fibers, they may only shorten a little because they're short fibers, but there's a lot more power to their contraction. So there are three functional groups for your muscles. Remember, you have the prime movers, which are responsible for the majority of a movement. You have the antagonists, which are the muscles that oppose the prime movers, and you have the synergists, which help the prime movers to accomplish their movement. I also talked a bit about how muscles in the body are named, and I gave you some examples. The main reason for this is I'm hoping that there were some clues in this video that will help you retain and remember the names of the muscles that you need to remember for lab. When you get to your lab practical, if you can look at a muscle, see which way the fascicles are going or the direction of the muscle fibers, that may help you to remember what the muscle is named. Things like how many heads there are in a muscle, where the origins and insertions are. All those things can be helpful. Where the muscle is located and what its movement is. All of that is helpful. Think about that as you go through the different muscles over the next couple of weeks in lab and try to understand what they do.